All right, so we are back in beautiful Miami for another future-focused episode of the Resilient Alpha podcast. So if you walk down the streets of New York City, there are a multitude of wealth managers serving the merely wealthy. But today we're sitting down with Salvador Buscemi, former Goldman Sachs investment banker, three-time author, and managing partner at Brayman Partners, where he and his team deploy capital exclusively for the top 0.01% of global investors. I'm sorry, 0.001% of global investors. Sal has spent 2 decades running his own institutional grade balance sheet, co-investing alongside multi-billion-dollar families in Class A real estate, life sciences, professional sports franchises, and other statement assets that most people will never see. His most recent book is Investing Legacy, How the 0.001% Invest pulls back the curtain on how the ultra-wealthy actually think about money, reputation, liquidity, and generational transfer. Today we're going all in on what comes next, the opportunities, structures, and mindsets that will define private investing over the next decade and beyond. Sal, great to have you here.
Marty, it's a pleasure and a privilege. We've known each other for 20 years, and
it's always been good.
It's always been great, and following you around like the Grateful Dead, I tell everybody.
Fantastic, great. So you said the next 5 to 10 years will be the biggest wealth transfer and capital redeployment cycle in history. Walk us through where you see the trends moving from, and more importantly, where the 0.001% are positioning it for the 2030s and 2040s.
You know, I think it depends on the family, and not all families are alike. If you're working with an operating family that has, that we know well, that throws off billions of dollars of cash flow, they're looking to set up things and do their own types of investments as it relates to things that will give them EBITDA in 2026. All right, such a unsexy name for this is rolling up grease traps, and grease trap cleaning businesses, because people, as long as there's going to be humans, there's going to be grease, right? And then you have other families that aren't as established, and what they're looking to do is to co-invest into companies, and mostly real estate, because to them, they understand real estate, it's tangible. There's been a lot of wealth that has come as a result of the pandemic, of course, but over the past 20 years. Where that money's going is not where you think it's going to go. I think you're going to see a lot of it not get deployed outside or into direct investments, sort of like doing grease trap cleaning roll-up businesses, but they'll mostly be stuck with RIAs, and I think, a lot of these people who are, they call themselves family, they qualify as family offices. I quantify it as 100 million and over. However, they don't, and for other reasons we get into it, they're sort of locked up and they don't make those types of investments. So I think, it's just going to be keep it the way it is. There's a lot of emotional things that I talk about in my book that people have to work with when they inherit a lot of money. But I also think that a lot of it is not going to go be invested. I think you're going to have a generation of people who are just not going to work and live a life of leisure.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting, because we've experienced this, is that when it comes to multi-generational transfer, there's the entrepreneur who creates the wealth, and then a lot of the money goes into trusts, which is better for tax advantage. And then the trust releases some capital, and that's deployed to the next generation. And so that next generation has to be educated and understand how to invest it.
Right.
And you're saying that a lot of them are working with RIAs, and it's kind of stuck with an RIA in a cycle, and that there's probably better ways to deploy.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the middle right now of like Art Basel, when you talk to a lot of families, and what you don't realize is that some of these people who do, they have the second generation, they are legitimately family offices, but they don't have discretion, which means they can't write the check. So it's like, hey, every time somebody tells me to speak to their RIA, I try to avoid it altogether. But sometimes, just because of nice and principle, we have these lunches at these nice private gatherings at the Aston Martin building, and then you find out that, she needs to talk to her RIA. And then the RIA says, we don't invest in startups, or we don't invest in private direct real estate. We have all these funds, right? So funds equal fees. Funds are a 4-letter word to families, but a lot of people don't understand this because they don't take the time to really understand it. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because there was a familiar refrain with everyone that I talked to about what is it that the very wealthy are investing into? What am I getting into? How come, what is really rich today? What does that really look like? And number 2, what are my richer brothers and sisters doing? And what's this conversation you had with, you helped the family put their name on the side of a library, right? With what are the exits and stuff? Why are they all going into Bitcoin? Are they, and you got to think about it, is that everybody somewhere always has some sort of a predisposition as to what their parents have told them that haven't changed. And a lot of the great Depression era type of lessons learned with savings has been destroyed since the pandemic.
So a great freedom is self-determination.
Correct.
But a lot of this next generation don't have that because their money is stuck with an RIA, et cetera. As you said, in the RIA world, it's about getting on a platform, and those platforms are all driven by fees.
Yeah.
Right. And they're looking for certain types of funds. Some of them are fiduciaries, and they're looking for safe, but not necessarily the best opportunity for alpha.
Yeah, correct. Some of these guys have been like in, let's just call it Goldman Sachs Real Estate Partners Fund 11, which is on his 10th year of its 7th term, right? And so,
so the way the Ivy Family Office Group started is that we had a huge hedge fund network, and a family office came to us and said, our money's with Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
And they're terrible because they charge us all an arm and a leg in fees, number one. Mm-hmm. And number two, we are sure that every deal that comes to us, we're the last person, like it's been shown to everybody else up and down Wall Street before it comes to us, right? So we want more immediate access.
You just said it right there. So we're working with probably the most serially successful real estate family in America. And he and I were talking, and the way we got into this relationship, and I've known him for 9 years, is that it's access. The access to the deals that we're doing, these guys aren't going to get. You could have $1 billion with JP Morgan, and you know what? You are not going to get access to these direct deals. And that's what these families want, is that they want to be able to touch the cloth, if that makes sense. Right. And that also comes with like a lot of like, social engagements, which we'll get into with networking, but a lot of them just don't network. We can talk about that later, but they don't know what they don't know.
A lot of the barriers to that social networking have come down, right? I mean, in the 30 years ago, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, they owned relationships.
Yeah.
But now relationships are pretty, fungible, and that you can, penetrate. And if a guy who's selling knows you're buying, why even bother, why go through Goldman Sachs to you? Why not just go straight to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, then you have to go back to the RIA, right? And asking an RIA to part with a small, tiny percentage of something is probably the most inappropriate question you can ask, right? Because they're never going to pair that away. They would rather you ask to sleep with their spouses than to pair off any assets, because they're getting paid, they're clipping a coupon for as long as that money's,
Exactly, right. Yeah. So there's always the conflict between
no alignment of interest,
fee, et cetera, right? So let's talk about Class A real estate.
Yeah.
So when you have Class A real estate with proven sponsors, it's been a cornerstone for the family offices you work with. As interest rates are normalizing, new construction pipelines drying up, what subsectors do you believe will produce the strongest risk-adjusted cash-on-cash yields through the next 10 years?
We love, and we're going back into it for the first time in 5 years with this one family that I was talking about, Class A industrial flex, especially in Dallas. You're dealing with high-growth areas. They're not slowing down there.
Fantastic area.
Yeah, fantastic area. Right now we're finishing one deal that we really like. It's our first deal, but we like working with operators. And I'll just tell you, there's 3 rules. And if people understood these rules, they would not have lost their money in multifamily syndications, for example. Number 1, no first-time GPs or operators, right? I mean, that's where you see in a lot of Class C to B multifamily. A lot of guys, he swing for the fences. He tries to do a value-added opportunity. The problem is bridge loans made that easy, and, that sort of screwed up.
I mean, we had this whole period of syndications.
We didn't
10
do
years
anything.
of syndications, and a lot of them were just terrible.
Yeah.
And you had the wrong people on the capital stack.
To me, the cap table is the soul of the asset, Murray, right?
Thank you for telling me that.
So when we look at that, I also want to see that they have audited financials, and they've been through at least 2 down cycles. This one we're sitting in right now in 2025, 2026, it hasn't started or ended yet. 2008 was major, and then coming off of the RTC. So I want to see people that have that type of experience before I make any sort of engagement into it. And usually when you see that and you just cut through it and you just know that this is a people business and you're betting on the jockeys, not the horses or the real estate, you see that you see less deal flow but higher quality deals.
A great, and like in Austin, Texas, there was lots of syndications. People were building up, but nobody built any new streets or roads or highways. And when you drive into Austin, you're lucky if you get anywhere. But if you go to Dallas has been fantastic at managing its growth.
Yeah.
I mean, the story it tells over the last 20 years is amazing. So that's why it makes so much sense to be where you're at.
And if you remember in the late 90s, they also, they became less oil and more technology. Do you remember that?
There's a lot of great, smart people there. And there's actually a couple of fantastic life science private equity firms there. Mm-hmm. And then you have some guys who are big in the private equity space with technology, intellectual property. There's a couple of billionaires who all teamed up. They formed a.
It's become a hub. It's become an intellectual hub, and that's what you want, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think McComb's family office has been super active there, and then you've got the Perot family, et cetera. So
absolutely.
So you've been privately investing in life sciences companies for years. AI-driven drug discovery, longevity research, and gene editing no longer being science fiction. How are your families restructuring their life science exposure for the next decade?
They want to see the component to it with AI. They want to see some sort of an AI component to it. But AI means different things to different people today. We have a great company we've invested into, and what they're doing is that they're collecting data. It's Thrive Bioscience, put together by a friend, Tom Forrest Barber.
Oh, fantastic company.
Yeah, and he's really ramped that up nicely. But what he's really building, and a lot of people don't understand this, is that he'll have the Bloomberg of data, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
The Bloomberg, Bloomberg terminal for those.
Maybe you could say what Thrive Biosciences is.
Thrive Bioscience does real-time drug discovery, where they take massive amounts of data on a cell in different planes, and it's basically replacing the Petri dish, which is an 80-year-old technology. And you have to think about it. Every time somebody pulls something out of a Petri dish, you disrupt it. The environment might be too hot, too humid, too cool, whatever it is. And then there's also people who are just, I don't know if you remember the story, but we had a lot of investors send this to me, and then they wanted to invest because some guy in New York, I think it was Columbia, pulled the plug on the refrigerator holding all the
there you go. Yeah.
So off the Petri dishes and everything, and it destroyed all the research. Here you're going to have real personalized drug discovery in real time. And that is really what I think you're coming down to, is being able to show, how a cell reacts to a drug in real time. And people really like that, collecting the data from it and then being able to sell that data to other areas. It's a picks and tool, picks and
shovels. It's fantastic. Which a lot of people want to get into. They don't want to be on the bleeding edge. They want to say, how do I feed the bleeding edge, right?
I mean, that's capital intensive in a
it's interesting because a lot of people were saying, we had this venture capital panel a couple of days ago, and we're saying, well, it's hard to get those returns in venture capital. You're locked up. But what do you think about alternative funding approaches to venture capital? There's still venture capital, there's venture debt, there's royalty finance. What are your thoughts about the different types of approaches?
We we're not too familiar with royalties, although we have been offered royalties with one of the companies that's expecting an exit next year. Usually you want an all-cash deal like we had with Singapore Life, which was great. It was acquired in the first quarter 2024 by its majority shareholder, Sumitomo Life. But, sometimes you have to, different exits and different companies have different capitalizations and, different cap structures and different industries. Some are more hot than others. We like making the private direct investments into these, and the reason is because the families want to be able to hold on to something and meet someone, and interactivity with the families we work with is really something that's very important to them, because they want to be able to meet guys like Tom or other people who are mentioning, or Marty. I mean, you've been to our events, and so that's part of the hallmark of what we do and that's the ecosystem that keeps people coming to us, and then the referrals just dogpile on top of it.
Tom's like a real gladiator in this space. He actually fits all of the things you've been talking about. Somebody who's been through cycles, multi-time success, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So let's talk about statement assets. So, there's always been these, trophy assets like real estate, sports franchises. I mean, he's always say American royalty bought NFL teams, right?
Mm-hmm. That's how in London, they knight you. In the United States, they let you buy a sports team.
Right. Or you buy a top soccer team, right?
Yep.
In London. So tell me about new categories of assets that you expect to emerge as billionaires, signal legitimacy assets to own.
Statement asset is something I came up with during the book, because it was trophy assets meant different things for different people. But a statement asset is, what do your friends say behind your back to their friends about you? And I know Marty, he owns this sports team, right? He's a big guy. It is a statement. It's a store of wealth, don't get me wrong, but it's a private club to get into it. And it's harder to get into these than it is really to buy a condo in New York City. Right, even a famous person.
Right, sure, yeah.
Right, and there's also, these are well-protected brand franchises, and I'm just talking about professional major league sports in, London and, in America too as well, overseas. These are, they throw off, if they're managed well, they throw off a lot of cash flow. And they're really, cozy family businesses, and they're really, the families that own them, they're run like real small businesses. You wouldn't believe it, but they are. But they don't want any drama. And if you have any issues on Google and you want, you're a newly minted, billionaire, for example, but you have some bad things on Google about maybe harassment or, such, you're not going to be invited. That's just the way it is. So it's an elite club. But the people who get into that are usually two people. Number one, people who have just inherited something and they want to show some sort of legitimacy, right? They have this burden that they didn't earn it. It's like, how can you outdo it? If you've ever seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari, the kill shot is you're not Harry Ford, you're Harry Ford Jr. And that caused him to, create, all sorts of successes with Ford and racing. Same thing happens here. The others are those who are really looking to network. And I can tell you, being around these people, the networking is the best. It's like, what is it? One of those clubs, I forget it, but it's like, what is it? You have that, I can't remember, but it's like one of these, I can't, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to go back. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, Sport Club in New York, or Club, or like, one of these places that you go off to run around in the wilderness with rich people in San Francisco, something like that, right?
But on steroids.
Yes. Of course.
Yeah, on steroids. So going forward, these sports teams are still going to attract a lot of investment. There's a lot of emerging leagues that are coming up too. A new fan is born every minute, right? Or every second. And we've also invested alongside other things too. And also in real estate,
So one thing I want to bring up is that we are in Miami, where half the streets are named after athletes.
Yes.
Right? You've got a Don Shula Highway, you've got a Dan Marina Boulevard. Right, exactly, right? So it just never ends.
No,
right?
It never ends. But, and also, there's a lot more revenue streams coming into these businesses now than ever before, with streaming and licensing and partnerships and gambling. And
it's not just that. I mean, the players themselves, they have their own personal brands, which enriches the brand of the team. It's all cross-pollination.
It's all, look at what LeBron did to Ohio. He was the single most greatest generator of GDP for Cleveland. Right?
Fantastic. Yeah, right? Exactly. Right.
Like the Joe Rogan of Boston.
Would owning the Joe Rogan podcast be a legitimacy thing? Or
I don't know how you would do that.
So something that's interesting is that, in 2008, when everything went into the crapper, we got like a whole portfolios of real estate, like Lowe's down here, and I would say half of the South Beach hotels were sent to us for like 60% off, 70% off, right? You could their statement, hotels. If you own the Fontainebleau, that's pretty nice, right? So
good real estate, bad balance sheet.
Exactly right. So where do you think are going to be the next statement assets for this in 5 years for this newly minted billionaire class?
I think it's just going to be, you're going to see offices, I think not 3rd Avenue, New York. I think 3rd Avenue should be carpet bombed right now. But I think you're going to start to see the bigger offices. They start to trade hands. You have a lot of families like Armancio Ortega, for example, the Inditex, Zara. If you ever see someone with a Zara bag, the proceeds of that are going to pay free and clear for $1.3 billion worth of real estate each year.
Wow.
That he buys all over the country. And he's buying all sorts of things. As it relates to industrial centers. I think he bought a data center, if I'm not too sure about that, but he also bought one of the largest offices in London too. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the old BBC building.
And I think actually we can take a step back, because if we go back again to 2009, 2010, a lot of the trophy assets were bought by large sovereign wealth funds, large pension funds. I think like the South Korean pension fund bought a bunch like the Sears Tower and things like that. But a lot of those guys, they're satiated with already buying assets. So these new assets will be available to family offices.
It's going to be a transfer at some point,
Yep.
What that looks like in the future, whether that's crypto, or, any sort of cryptocurrency, associated with it, where people are trying to, sort of democratize the ownership of those assets with adding digitization.
So let's take a step to another direction. So there are, there's a lot of great family offices. Each one has their own way of approaching business. You've got entrepreneurs who are made money in one thing and they're trying to find other things to invest in. But you're great at underwriting deals and finding deals, etc. But you need to talk to somebody else. Mm-hmm. How do you interact with family offices who are like just starting to build their internal teams to understand how you're underwriting, or looking to do co-directs or co-investments or things like that?
That's a very good question. We keep it very open, which means that when we are bringing this out to people, we will invite the families or actually the next gens themselves to go on the phone to go over the numbers of the deal to see it how we do it. And then we'll usually bring someone else on who's a professional, where we triangulate, if we're going into SpaceX, which we've done 6 times, today they just came out with saying, they're probably offering an $800 billion tender. Back when we got in around 100, that was seen as like a far stretch even then. But I think when you democratize and you show people, and it comes down to a level of trust that you're able to show these people, like, this is how we're looking at the math. Here's someone else, this is like sort of like I wouldn't say an investment committee meeting, but this is sort of how we go through due diligence, and we have other people here. I like to socialize the deal before I go into it. All right. Mm-hmm. The first thing you do is you bury the ego. All right. You just bury the ego, and it saves you trouble. Like, and we have, there's been many opportunities where we could have gone into and maybe landed on some things that we didn't want to, but because we talk to people and we have a great network, it helps. But I had 2 institutional funds, and institutional funds look at numbers. They're much more quantifiable. They look at the numbers, they look at everything, whereas families don't understand the numbers, especially new families. They want to get into real estate, but they don't understand real estate. They think they know real estate, but they don't really understand how a capital raise works or a syndication. They just think,
tough, yeah.
So you have to, there's a lot of hand-holding and training. And that builds confidence and builds relationships, because since the pandemic, we've become, I think, very isolated, and we've been living in an area right now where it's a loneliness epidemic that's happening. And so the more you reach out to people, the more you connect with them, the better it is. These people want to do that. They don't want to talk to their wealth manager who's going to give them a bottle of water and, rip their face off with fees all the time. They're much more story oriented. And when we do talk to these deals, we talk about how it was sourced, why it's important, who's the person who sourced it to us. There's only a handful of people I'll accept calls from besides Marty, maybe Rosemary anytime. But we're very, very careful about the deals that we look at, but we also socialize it in a way where people can understand it. You have to take the time to communicate. Nobody is going to write you a check without giving you their time first. And for anyone who's an emerging founder or a fundraiser, you have to understand, if you're raising money, don't treat it transactionally. Just don't shoot over a 20 megabyte PDF and expect someone to read it. People are already burdened with
that. That's crazy, because we were talking on an earlier podcast that so many people are generating their decks right now using AI. Yeah. It just means you're getting maybe you can read 500 decks faster, but there's 500 times more AI, decks being produced by the AI.
Yeah.
So it's, and they all sound the same. They're all the same material.
They all sound the same. They all have the same prompting where they want to bring it sound like they're pitching to Andreessen Horowitz, which they're not. It's, to me, it's a relationship game. It really is.
Personal relations matter more than ever.
And, we purposely, I shouldn't say this, but we purposely keep our deal book light because we're very opportunistic. We're structured legally, with our structures to be able to go where mice go, where elephants can't. And that's why we've been able to get into some incredible deals such as AI.io, which recently got a huge investment from a sovereign wealth fund. And, they'll be announcing that too. And some other things like Stripe, SpaceX, Tom's deal, Thrive Bioscience. So, these are invitations that we look at seriously because people trust us to execute in the market.
Fantastic. Great. So you managed an institutional balance sheet since you were 29 years old.
Yeah.
How do you expect governance, reporting, and co-investment alignment to evolve between multi-generational families and their outside operators over the next 10 to 20 years?
Governance is a real problem. There's always going to be inter-family dynamics that you're going to have to deal with. And I actually got caught with my pants down. Because, and this goes back to discretion, what we were talking about before, there's a friend of ours we know, very, very good, long-standing family going back generations. He wanted to write a big check for our latest real estate deal. And by the time the trust docs came over and everything, what happened is he could not close the deal because he needed to have his brother agree. And he and his brother do not talk. So
sounds familiar.
He thought he was going to be able to get his soon-to-be ex-wife to sign, but she doesn't like him either, or I don't know. There's always going to be conflict and things like that. I try to avoid that as much as possible. You're not going to be able to change anyone's governance or enter family politics.
You really need another relationship.
Yeah, you really need the relationships. But even those, these are people that have real family offices, not 200 million sitting at JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, right? So, if you are, a real operating family and you do make meaningful investments, you're going to have to deal with things. And I think a lot of people don't have governance. They just have RIAs. And then you're going to see a wealth transfer happen and people are going to stop talking to each other.
Yeah, it's super interesting because you live in the world of discretionary capital.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who have no discretionary capital.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a theme of what we were talking about today.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wholeheartedly.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting because I always tell people to watch out for second generation because they're not discretionary.
I mean, I'm going to make a joke.
And it's not a bad thing. I mean, it just is what the entrepreneur intended.
No, I know what it's like, but I also ask the hard question now, especially here, because my partner and I have a joke that if you see a second generation male and he has hair down to his shoulders, he has no discretion with his father.
That's it. I mean, if the entrepreneur worked really hard, we had a family office once. He was third generation, but the family was one of the founders of Coca-Cola. Yeah. And he said that his dad lived 100 years old. By the time his dad died, most of the money was gone. He had to rebuild it, right? So,
that was a lot.
So it's, you never know what's going to happen with that second generation. So capital raising, it's not getting any easier. We've all seen relationships hit, barriers, headwinds, etc. How do you get a better marketing funnel? Like, what are the two best non-obvious relationship habits that are the most successful for next-gen wealth creators to adopt right now that others are missing?
As it relates to what? As
it relates to building a marketing funnel where you're seeing deal flow, because the world is dominated by funnels.
Nobody. Yeah. So the world is dominated.
It really is. I went to an Ivy League school. There's an Ivy League funnel. It's just the way it is.
No,
sorry, guys.
It is. I think the best way to do this is that you got to get right with technology. We do this by, interactivity is the cornerstone of what we do at Brahmin Partners, and so you saw that with our dinners and events. But I also make sure that I record video testimonials of people who we've worked with. Those video testimonials go into a drip campaign. So when I meet someone tonight, maybe you, what I'll do is I'll get your email, I'll get your contact, we'll do the bump or whatever it is on WhatsApp. But now I have permission to email you, and I will send you a text. Hey, Marty, I just sent you an email. It says, welcome to Brahmin Partners, Marty. Did you get it? Yes. Okay, that's the first. Once they get through that, then HubSpot says it's great. And I'm not getting technical here, but you want to send out something once a week. There's an interesting book. I know you asked me for a book, but I read it one day just because I was bored, and it's called How to Start Your Own Church. And it's a quick read, but what they really get down to is you want to make sure that the flock meets at least once a week. Otherwise, the flock goes to another church or goes away. And that's the way I would do that. And I've worked with founders in the same respect who have all these great, testimonials with their products and everything. Tom, one of them, like, Tom, we gotta get you the testimonials. We got to do this. And that really goes a far way because people value trust today. AI is not going to give you trust, right? Trust is between two humans. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's not as transactional as they think it is. It's much more relational. And to build those relationships, you need to be able to communicate with these people who are your flock. Right.
There's lots of layers to that trust as well. Mm-hmm. So I sat across from a family office and they said, I'm not getting any distributions, right? I'm in the best funds in the world and I'm not getting a distribution for 3 years. And so liquidity is really the Achilles heel for most private investors. I mean, you have to really talk to them about what their horizon is for investing. Mm-hmm. How do you lock up capital for 15 to 20 years from a family without them blinking? What kind of mental construct do you need to get there?
You need to know what they want. Like, I know there's a very big Asian family I know, and he said, Sal, don't call me for anything less than $100 million in real estate. That's it. And that's like a New York City, building. I think the other way too is that, you don't want to, if somebody's allergic to shellfish, don't pitch them something, right? And I think that's been a lot of problems with people is that they think as though that they have a lot of money. They don't tell you, but what they actually do is you can figure out if they're really wealthy or not because you'll ask them the hard questions. I'll go in and be like, this is a great deal. It's got everything on it, but can you afford to lose this $2 million? And that
right.
You ask the hard question. Really?
What's within the risk parameters, and you really have to underwrite to that.
Yeah. No, you have to. I think it's that it's changed. And again, there's been so much wealth since the pandemic for who knows why. But you have to qualify your investors. You need to trust them more than they trust you, because what you're really doing is you're soliciting these people for marriage into these deals, and you got to ask them. This is a $2 million ticket. Thank you. I just want to make sure you can afford to lose this if all hell goes loose in Dallas and, whatever. These are honest questions.
So we're going through times of like great generational change. I mean, now you've got these flying cars in places like Dubai and China is totally transformed.
Yeah.
So in 10 years, all these 30 and 40-year-olds who are getting these transfers of wealth will now manage their estates. Mm-hmm. It's well known that a lot of times when people inherit wealth, they change the RIA, they change the money manager, they go to somebody else that they feel more comfortable with. What do you think is going to be the biggest philosophical shift between all of these new inheritors versus their parents and grandparents?
I think the ones who are going to take it seriously are going to be thinking about their legacy.
Okay.
A lot of people don't want to think about that. They want to think about the good times. But I think, and the reason why I wrote my book is because, being really, really frank, guys today don't hold the purse strings. Women do, and some of these families. And they're looking for something where they can, point to their legacy. If you look at some of the families we know, they've invested in some interesting things, which is, caused, we used to call it impact, but today the buzzword is legacy. And the reason for that is because now people are getting into longevity, right? So the longevity, I think we're just, that's just, starting to crest. But when you mix longevity with, tremendous amount of, wealth that's created, a lot of people are going to obviously, I think, go towards legacy. And that's been the buzzword now for the past 4 years. I didn't start that, but it's something you're hearing about.
Sure. I mean, legacy is big, especially in healthcare investing. Sure. And if somebody says, I cured cancer, and actually, if their whole family has been wiped out by cancer, it actually is additive, right?
I mean, that's a new paragraph in your obituary, right? Like, I always ask these people jokingly, I'm like, what do you want your kids and your grandkids to say of you after you've passed?
Amazing, right? Yeah. I mean, we have actually one family office who, their kids suffer from a skin disease where most people die by the time they're 7 years old. Yeah. And they've invested in every company that does this. They own about 20% of the companies in the space. Mm-hmm. And their kid who has a disease is now 15. Yeah. Right? Because the dad loves his kids so much. He's like, I'll do anything to
legacy.
Yeah. So there you go. So, let's take a look towards a forward-looking piece of advice to an operator or a sponsor or emerging family office about what will matter the most in 10 years than it does now?
Yeah, I think quantitative skills are out the window. Critical, but AI is doing that, right? Just like what you were saying before, AI is putting together the pitch books for these founders. The skill set you need to have today as a founder is salesmanship and persuasion. You need to be able to go out to talk to people, not necessarily hit them over the head, but building a relationship for yourself and building a personal brand around that. Remember, your brand is your promise. That is something that I learned a long time ago. It's not a logo, it's your promise. And if you think about every family out there that's established, they all have some sort of a legacy that they follow. But you have to understand, this is not transactional. When I came out 4 years ago, Bitcoin was, at its apex. And I just remember going to the Fontainebleau, and there were these two 20-year-old guys with literally suitcases full of cash. And they were paying like a $20,000 bar bill. They were all transactional, right? I mean, as soon as you get their number, they were pitching you some coin or something. The families today value relationships, and you got to court investors as if you're courting people to marry, because you are marrying them.
Absolutely. I mean, especially since timelines are expanding, et cetera. So you've been in a book. Mm-hmm. Is there some way you can summarize it in a paragraph or less and then tell us how we can get it?
Yeah, I'm going to get, just for people who are listening to this podcast with Marty, it is a book that I wrote because it answered a lot of the questions in the common refrains that I've saved over the years. And what we did is we put a book together that answered all of the questions about what super rich people are doing. A lot of people say 1%, but that's a doctor and a dentist, maybe on a seaboard city.
Simply wealthy.
Yeah, simply wealthy. Not rich enough, NREs we call them. But the 0.001%, these are the ones who have over $100 million in assets. I wrote a book because there was really no play for it. They didn't know. They also had, and I mean this in the most sincere way, a distrust of their father's IRA. Distrust of
RIA, yes.
Yeah, RIA, because they see a faded, tribal tattoo under his sleeve, and he's thinking, does this guy really deserve to manage this much money? I saw my parents, lose it and gain it and lose it and then make it big back again, and the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that. That's where I see it going.
Yeah, it's really hard. And how do people reach you?
They can get the free copy autograph. I'll pay for it if they send an email with their mailing address to sal@investinglegacy.com.
And mention Resilient Alpha Podcast. So,
yes.
Fantastic. So we're going to take a break for the lightning round, and then we'll get right back to you. So we're into the lightning round now. So we're back with Sal Buscemi. So the one asset class of the 0.001% will own dramatically more of in 10 years than today.
I think it's going to be crypto related.
Interesting. Yeah. There's a lot of great opportunities in blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain. I think that's not going to go away. I think it's just getting started.
I think there's no way you can do AI without blockchain because people want to get, I think Hollywood is furious that blockchain and the New York Times is that AI is stealing all their content, right? It's just terrible.
Well, they're suing ChatGPT or OpenAI for that. So that's going to be interesting.
And I think Europe will be on top of that too. There's going to be a lot of antitrust against this AI stuff that's happening, right? Once somebody makes a copy of famous Italian movie directors or French directors and starts putting it on AI, they're going to be suing them like crazy. So, one asset class that you think there'll be dramatically less of in the future?
That's a good one. I think you're going to start to see, people move away from traditional funds and traditional private equity funds. I think you're going to start to see people moving more towards doing direct investments. I think information has become democratized today. People, they can get access to anything today, really, if they want to look for it, right? I mean, you can learn anything, you want off of the internet. It just takes time to do it. And I think it's the same thing too with that particular asset class. I just don't think you're going to see too much of it, right?
There's a lot of disappointment in private equity. I think the statistic is that only 1/3 of funds have in the last 8 years have successfully raised a new vintage. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said earlier, that fund is a 4-letter word to these families, because they just get stuck in these things. It's like the Roach Motel. There's continuation funds now. Nobody's getting any liquidity out of it.
Yep.
But they're paying fees, right? It's a Roach Motel for fees for, the sponsors.
Yeah. So, what are the biggest tailwinds for private real estate returns in the next 5 years?
Interest rate cuts. We have the Trump administration. He's the king of debt. He's been pressuring everybody, to lower rates. I think Jerome Powell has had too much heat under the collar. He's getting ready to leave soon, and there's going to be someone who's going to be much more interest rate friendly going forward.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Which is why we're getting in now.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest headwind is?
I think it's going to be political changes. You start to see anything sort of changing politically, that's going to be a net detriment. I know that we will never go near multifamily in New York because of the pandemic. A lot of families that we knew lost everything. Signature Bank went under also because of the fact that they changed the tenants' laws, right? So you lost control of the asset. If you lose control of the asset, meaning you can't generate income for it, you're going to lose it.
Yeah, I think you get kind of whiplash because you're going one direction and then another party comes in and you go in the other direction. So
yeah, nobody wants that. And especially people who are looking for next generation 30 years out, as I said before, EBITDA in 2020, in 2046, that's what people are looking for today.
So what's the ultra wealthy family portfolio going to look like in the future? I mean, 60-40 has kind of been retired. You see a lot more people into alts, but what's it going to look like in the future?
I don't think it's going to be 70-40. I don't think it's going to be, 70-30 or 60-40. I think recently that 60-40 has sort of been blown out of the water recently. It just hasn't work. You're just going to get people. There's going to be a democratization of assets that people are going to be buying into. I mean, think about it. When you're looking at the RIAs, these are real family offices. But if you look at the RIAs, they're going to be introducing all sorts of opportunities through their funds that might be digital, where it could be anything that relates to digital trading, to private credit, to things like that.
Yeah. So what's the next sports franchise equivalent that's like a prestige sort of asset for the ultra wealthy?
Elon Musk.
Getting a piece of Elon? Yeah,
getting a piece of Elon with SpaceX. We'll be going into Neuralink soon. That's what I think people want to see. I have a saying. It was, a lot of people, I'm a real estate guy, and they say that most wealth was made in real estate. I think over the next 10 years, 20 years, it will be Elon Musk that's minted more millionaires than any other, industry.
Just like the Elon Musk ETF you need to buy into. Right. Fantastic. Great.
Yep.
So in one word, the biggest single competitive advantage for a family office in the next 10 years?
Continuing the network. I think if you're able to team up with other families that are bigger and stronger and more experienced than you, that's where you want to be today. That's how we do it. We always look towards experience whenever we look at deals. We want to make sure we're going alongside people who have not just a lot of money to lose, but also credibility.
How many families will buy into tokenized assets in the next 5 years?
They'll be forced to. I don't think they will. I think they'll, at some point, that's just a natural evolution. Everything's going to be tokenized at some point. I mean, that's happening.
Yeah, because it's going to unlock a lot of value. So, one book besides your own that you suggest every next gen read?
My favorite book, and I read it, it's Ogilvy on Advertising. It was written in 1983, and man, does he have some gems in there. And it's not just for any family. It talks about their reputation. And my favorite quote in there, he said, "Any institution is the lengthened shadow of one man." And when you look at how he goes down and how he works with clients and everything, it really is interesting in a very brass tacks type of way to pull away a lot of incredible value on that, especially if you're a founder looking to build your own shop.
Yeah. Brand and personal brand matter more than ever.
We are in a personal branding era right now.
So in 10 years, are we going to be in a world of capital abundance or scarcity?
capital abundant.
Fantastic. So just another quick question. If I'm in the 0.001%, or I want to read your book, how do I reach you, Sal?
You can reach me by sending an email, sal@investinglegacy.com. I'll say it one more time, sal@investinglegacy.com, and you want to mention Resilient Alpha in the mail so I know where it come from, and I'll treat you with the best customer service. We'll make sure we get an autographed copy out to you. It is also available on Amazon as narrated by author myself. It's been critically reviewed, but there's another way to do it as well, and you can listen to it. It's about 4.5 hours.
Fantastic, Sal, and thank you for being a guest.
Thank you, Marty.
Yeah, we'll see Miami next year.
Cheers. Thank you.